Group 3's soft biscuit wheats, for those of you who I hope eat Carr's table water biscuits, know that there's something that are very close to our heart here, so we do mill an awful lot of biscuit wheat. Our mills for doing this are in the north, and obviously in Scotland, the northeast and the borders, then the market for your wheat there is predominantly biscuit flour or wheat going into the distillers. So I've got opinions here from the Scottish Whisky Research Institute as well, and luckily the type of soft biscuit wheat that suits us also generally is the type of variety that also suits good distillation. Interestingly, in the rest of the country, for the new bioethanol plants, the one in Teesside, which is currently mothballed, but the Vivergo plant in Hull, which will be starting, I understand, in a few months' time, that they would prefer the similar type of wheats that we like for soft biscuit wheats. It's simple, it's starch. A big, bold, blobby grain full of starch, more starch than protein, is what is a good biscuit wheat and distilling wheat there. Of the varieties here, just going through the names here, Invicta is, I think, the new banker of a Group 3 soft. It's one we like the quality of it, and we understand yield wise it seems very effective. Scout is one that some millers like. It's one that we personally will use, but it's one that we will use by blending it with other varieties. I couldn't make a good biscuit out of 100% Scout, but it's one that we would use but not necessarily prefer. Clare, been around a long time, very, very popular. We definitely, it's the baseline variety that we would use in all our trials. Target, again, a good Group 3, no questions about that, as Tuxedo. Warrior, moving along there. Warrior is one that we don't really like, and from what you're saying about its agronomic possibilities as well, it's maybe not favoured. And Cocoon, I would say, is one that we definitely don't like. Its characteristics for making biscuits are not good.
Here we have Invicta, which is, as you say, a high yielding variety, but it can be late and also has a lower specific weight. It has a sort of a medium characteristic for distilling. It has good resistance to the yellow rust, and that actually includes the new rust. So it looks like its rating of 8, and is looking okay just for now. One thing to be aware of, though, that although it has a good rating for brown rust, there is a race which will affect it, and it's becoming more common now. And this explains as to why you should really look at the varieties and not just base it on the numbers we have in the recommended list. Next to that we have Scout. It's poor for distilling in its rating, moderate yield but stiff-strawed. But where it does have uses is really in early sowing. It's got a good eye spot resistance of a rating of 8, and it also has the orange wheat blossom midge resistance. As with others, though, one thing to be aware of, as with the Invicta, then there are perhaps issues as far as brown rust, because it's affected by the same race that affects Invicta. One thing we can do, as you mentioned, Warrior, which is infamously has the yellow rust race named after it. But that said, as you can see, although it gets the disease, it's not necessarily caused you severe damage in the crop. So, okay, yes, you will get disease on it, and you'll also get brown rust on it, because there is a new race of brown rust that came around last year. In that case, it wasn't actually named after Warrior. The brown rust race was named after Stig, and just to be aware that this variety will get it. We'll come on to Stig later on, though, because that is a variety where I think you can see that there has been a breakdown as far as the brown rust has been concerned. Cocoon here, there was a comment. There's a comment on, I can't remember, I think it was you were not necessarily jumping up and down about this variety. You got a thumbs down. As far as this variety, it is actually poor for distilling. So it got a thumbs down from the SWRI. Has an east-west rate, a recommendation only, and I think you can see that it is a tall variety, and will certainly need attention to detail as far as plant growth regulators are concerned. It's got good resistance from rust, but it is actually susceptible to brown rust at its early stages of development, but then the resistance kicks in. We do hope actually this year we'll get from our trials a lot of information as far as lodging is concerned, because because the last few years we haven't, what we'd say for trials work, a good lodging year, you might see it the other way around, but what we want are actually some, for our trials, wet and windy conditions when we get into grain fill, just so that it's a real test. But I suspect what we wanted is in our trials and you don't want it in your crops. Torch is a new variety which came on the recommended list this year, and at the time we knew that it was weak for yellow rust and it has a rating of 4. What I mentioned last year is the new race which came out was affected in some areas but not all last year, and this year it's become more widespread, and I think you can see straight away that it is very susceptible to the warrior race. And in effect, the only other plot which looks like that is Oakley. So the first question is, how many of you can you manage the rust in Oakley? Yeah, somebody's put their hand up, but you'll probably know that it's if your hobby is spraying, that's the sort of the only way you can keep the yellow rust under control. Protecting a crop from yellow rust is relatively straightforward. I mean, trying to eradicate the disease is next to impossible. This year, so in effect, if you're growing these sort of varieties, you have to start very early with your T0 fungicide, and then you must make sure you've got your fungicide on every 3 weeks or so, or the disease will really flare up. So in effect, you're heavily reliant upon the fungicides, and you're getting no help whatsoever from the variety to manage the yellow rust. We will come on to later with some of the other varieties which are on the recommended list, which we've got a better, more positive message. But also, as far as Torch is concerned, it does have export potential and it's classified as UKS, but it is rated poor for distilling.